Hello, and welcome to my video on why Yojimbo is the greatest triple triad player of all time. Now, I think I should say up front, Yojimbo and I were direct rivals. We regularly downplayed each other's achievements. We would not vote for each other in yearly award stuff. One thing that I think really speaks to Seto and Delial having smaller egos is that they were happy to vote for direct rivals for awards and credit them for their incredible successes, while we, small-egoed people, had much more trouble doing so. But I'm going to try to put that aside, and if you think I do a poor job, let me know, you know. But I'm going to try to make the case the best I can and really celebrate his incredible amount of achievements. So, Yojimbo came to Triple Triad Advance. I always thought from a French site. I had heard, I think, from him. I should say, we were cordial to each other. We were friendly at times. But I thought he had come over from a French site along with Great Sephiroth. I don't know the name of it, but Delial, who has played Triple Triad on every site imaginable and every format you can think of, has also dabbled on this site. Another report from an occult fan, he said he came over from a Czech site, and Midas brought him over to Triple Triad Advance and also was the one who introduced him into Brotherhood of Seed, which would become the clan he spent almost the entirety of his time on. He was also briefly in Wethril Odorim, but Brotherhood of Seed is surely where we all remember him. So he joins Triple Triad Advance in 2008, and he is already a competent player. In the first tournament he plays, he loses in his first round to Grat, but, losing to Grat is wholly respectable, and then immediately starts winning games and achieving icons. In his second tournament, he makes a quarterfinals, and then immediately after, I believe just in his third tournament, already makes a finals, beating Kona along the way, one of the greats. And in both of these tournaments, he ends up falling to his rival, or French site rival, Great Sephiroth. But you can see just from the start, he's winning icons, he's achieving things. He's already a good player when he appears, and he only becomes better. In 2009, in Rhinoa 5, this was one of the first Rhinoas where you got to team up with someone, and in the first of them, you could choose your teammate. So, for instance, Delial and Seto chose to team with each other, and Yojimbo and Great Sephiroth aligned. Great Sephiroth from here on I will refer to as GS. And they made another final, and he makes the quarters there, then he makes the finals in the next site championship before losing to Was Up. And at the end of 2008, this is cut off, but he was already rated 11th on the site, and, within his first year was clearly one of the best players around. In 2010, he wins Rhinoa 6, his first title, his first breakthrough. He finally wins a tournament after having made multiple finals, though he does lose the title match to Demonic Avenger, someone who my stats tend to underrate a bit, because Demonic's greatest achievements were in Rhinoa, where he played fantastically, but I don't have individual game records, and so it's hard for me to credit him for the incredible runs he had. Then he makes the quarterfinals in Rhinoa 7 and grabs the third icon for the year in Squall. And somehow, a mere 3 icons in a single year will seem low by Yojimbo standards, but for anyone else, this would be a phenomenal year. 2011 begins with Rhinoa 8, and he takes another Rhinoa championship. I should speak, I think, a little to Rhinoas. I don't have the individual records of the team ones, so it's hard for me to properly apportion credit. Which is to say, when I do give ratings and Yojimbo's incredibly high, you can easily consider that he deserves to be even higher due to his Rhinoa achievements. I also think Rhinoa was taken less seriously as a tournament, and I think people put less emphasis and effort into it, but I also think it showcased particular skill sets, because often ties counted. And so for your team to do well, if you would say a strong player and a weaker player and we're facing two pretty strong players, you really needed your strong player to grab wins in a single game because ties would count. And as I'll talk about, I think Yojimbo's probably the best player ever at winning games and with a single round to do so. And I think there's a lot of evidence towards this, but one of the pieces of evidence is his just absurd runs in Rhinoa tournaments, where he carried all levels of players to deep results. And I think that speaks to how strong he was at winning with the constraint that he needed to win within a single game. He also, in 2011, in 2010, there was the rebirth of Brotherhood of Seed, which he did with Kona, and in 2011, after having a heartbreaking loss for them in 2010, where they came incredibly close to the title, they lost, I believe, just one game all season. Yojimbo did lose that game, but he won a hell of a lot of others, and somehow, despite this just absurd win rate, ended up losing in the finals to Paradigm Shift. But in 2011, they come back and they win Clan Wars, and they will go on to win it every year after that Clan Wars happens. He doesn't have great non-Rhinoa results at this point. He falls back to 11th in the ratings after rising up to 9th, but he will rise. He will rise quite a bit. And he also in 2010 ends Dalial's streak of winning the Voted On Award Open Player of the Year. He wins the 2010 award. So even before he'd broken through in non-Rhinoa tournaments, he was already completely accepted as an absolute monster of the game and one of, if not the absolute best at it. Mid-2011 to the rest of through 2014, when he ends his career, he is just utterly dominant, with this weird exception that he keeps losing to Diacon Entite. But everyone loses to someone. It's just weird that he kept losing to the same person. Normally, people have these great runs and they lose to a few different people. But there was clearly some kind of particular matchup difficulty there. But aside those losses, he was utterly unstoppable to a point that the site has just not seen before, or obviously since, because it didn't last much longer after. So this is when Yojimbo made the leap from being just this great Rhinoa player and solid across the board to unstoppable everywhere. So he wins Triad Wars 10, his first tournament to be one that wasn't a Rhinoa, beating an incredibly strong field. We'll look through each of his tournament wins. There's a lot to look through, but this is probably his best. He loses to Dia Nanaki before winning the 10th site championship. Then he wins Quistis. Then he doesn't win Triad Wars 11 due to Diacon again, but he wins Cloud. He defends his championship title against Sir Smokes, and then becomes the second after Seto ever person to win 2 Triad Wars, winning the 12th one. And then he closes out his career by making 3 consecutive finals. I'm sure this was heartbreaking, but also 3 straight finals runs is a ridiculous achievement. The only players to ever make 3 finals in a row are Yojimbo and Doc Evil. And Sephiroth, TTAC 12, and Adia. So I also want to mention, because I think it was really important to him, but also something he was phenomenally good at, is he didn't just achieve himself, the people around him also achieved. And when he and Kona did the Boss Rebirth, their Clan Wars record was just off the charts. They made the finals in 2010, and then as you can see, they won 4 Clan Wars in a row, which is more than anyone else ever won, but also all in a row, and were just massive favorites every year and brought it home every year. And I don't have their Clan League results, but they won most years on that too. I think they dropped 1 maybe in there, maybe 2, but they were almost as good there as well. And I think a lot of that was his leadership, his working with people on that team, talking to them about strategy, helping them get better. A ton of the players who spent a lot of time around Yojimbo, Midas, Chickeny, just had these enormous jumps in their game and reached really high levels. And this is also true in Rhinoa, that players who were teamed with him, he clearly worked with, and they clearly got a lot better, and that improvement sustained. The players who were on a team with him continued to be better players after working with him. And I think this is something somewhat unique to him, of just not only did he have this absurd level of individual success, but he had this ability to raise the level of people around him and improve their games. And I think that was really important to things he focused on and cared about, but also just an incredible achievement. So going through his 7 tournament wins, 7, what a ridiculous number. In Rhinoa 5, we can see he teamed with Blizzard. He beats Cliff and Focus in the first round. Then he beats a Nightwish team. Then he knocks out Hollandair and Lactanon. And then in the quarterfinals, he beats Kazik and Midas. Midas being a player who is quite good now, but would later get better the more time he spent with Yojimbo. Kazik, obviously one of the best players to ever win a tournament. It's cut off here, but he beat myself and Mafi Josie in the semifinals. His team did, but he was, the carrying force there. And then he beat Blizzard in the finals to take down his first title. He followed that up in Rhinoa 7 by winning another one, this time teamed with Slug. Now, Slug and Blizzard were perfectly reasonable players, but it is impressive that he was able to carry teams that weren't 2 superstar teams. And while there are other times he was teamed with Kona once and they did not win, but it's really impressive how many middling or weaker players he carried to such deep runs. And you can see, like, in the semifinals here, they beat Cookie and MC, both 2 winners and, remarkably strong players. So here, he knocks out Amo and Kamikaze, a very strong team. He knocks out Sujiro and Fury. He knocks out Slash of Time and Vid. Between them, they won 5 tournaments. He knocks out Cookie and MC in the semifinals and beats Slug in the finals to take his second title. So he is, I think, the second best Rinoa performer of all time behind Slash. And so again, if you adjust the ratings I put up, feel free to give Yojimbo more credit than I give him in these ratings, and also to give Slash more credit, because I think these are the people that, based on tournament results, we sort of have, but don't quite fully have. These are the two players I underrate the most, and given how incredibly Yojimbo performs, that's kind of a crazy thing to say. And again, I think that Rinoa required the specific ability to win in a single game, and Yojimbo was very good at building hands ready to put pressure on in the first game. He didn't need to take time to figure out a rule set. One thing I think he was a lot better at than I was, for instance, was he often had a better sense of here's what's going to matter in a rule set, and I don't need a few games to figure it out and then really push for a win. I can push for a win immediately. And I don't really have a place to put this, so I stuck it here, but closed special edition tournaments are also not included in my open single-player ratings. But when rated those separately, Yojimbo's performances there are third best all time in closed tournaments. And so just across the board in the non-single-player events, from clan results to Rinoa events to closed events, Yojimbo was always at the top or very close to it, and just puts up this really varied, impressive resume. So getting back to different tournaments he won, Triad Wars 10 was the first single-player open tournament he won, and he had this crazy run. He gets an activity win in the first round, but then he beats Great Sephiroth, who, as we saw earlier, was a nemesis for him and someone he had a lot of difficulty with. And we'll read later a bit of an interview with him talking about this tournament and talking about what he did to beat Great Sephiroth. Then he beat Felix, and I think this was during Felix's best run on the site. He then beats Chickeny, one of the best players to never win a tournament. He then beats MC and beats me, who was up in the finals. And beating Great Sephiroth, MC, Chickeny, and myself in a single tournament. He only played 5 rounds. I don't think this is, the greatest tournament ever won. I think that's Seto and Triad Wars 8. But if you look at tournaments where a person only had to win 5 rounds, this is one of the best 2, and the other one was also won by Yojimbo. Then he wins TTAC 10, the 10th site championships. He beats Laluk, then he gets a bye, then he beats Alex, but then he beats Chickeny and Seto to take the title. Then in Quistis, he beats Seto in the first round, myself in the second round, his other rival Diacon Entite in the third round, Vid in the fourth round, Chickeny in the fifth round. I think this is the only 5-round tournament even better than the last one he won. We've already seen where Seto stands historically. Diacon Entite was a very tough opponent for him. I'm way up there. Vid was very good, and this was around Vid's peak. And Chickeny, as I said, one of the best to never win a tournament. You can see he knocked out players like Slash of Time on the way there. Then he wins SE Cloud. God, there's so many of these wins. In the first round, he gets a bye, but then he beats Vialva, then he beats Alex again, then he beats Borchardt, then he beats Kazdon, always a solid performer, and he beats Chickeny in the finals. This is a relatively weak run, but given how difficult his other runs were, you're always going to get some easy brackets, and he did close them out pretty comfortably, and, Chickeny's no slouch. Then in Triad Wars 12, another win for Yojimbo. He beats Roseman, he beats Raceland Majir, he beats Piglet, but then he takes out Sir Smokes and Dark Lord in the last 2 rounds. I don't have a good feel of how strong Dark Lord was. There was an attempt at a final tournament at the very end, just a mini tournament, not like a major one. And I did play Dark Lord in that, and I lost to him. I hadn't played in a while, but I was playing pretty decently, I thought, and I thought he just played very well and very precisely. And I know he's one of the best players to show up after my time. And so another great run by Yojimbo, and that closes out his 7 tournaments wins. And so I always say this, I can't just talk about how awesome someone was to say they're the best ever, right? There has to be a comparative case. There has to be what this person did that other people didn't do. Because someone could achieve lots of awesome things and have no case whatsoever for GOAT. And with Yojimbo, it is very easy to show the things he did that no one else did. His absurd achievement list just speaks for itself. He has more championships than anyone else with 7. Delial has next most with 6, and no one else has more than 4, Seto and myself. He has more icons than anyone else, with only Delial at all close and just a big lead on anyone else. He has more tournament wins than anyone else. He's well over 100. Delial's at, I think, exactly 100, and no one else is remotely close. He has a top-tier win rate. He's right up there with Seto and myself. It's just obvious why he's so far ahead of the field, because he's done more in every way you look at it than anyone else ever did. And I've tended to avoid comparison so far between the greats. I've said, here's what this player did that no one else achieved, but I didn't talk extensively showing, here's number one, here's number two, here's number three, because each has their own unique brilliance and their own unique achievements. But Yojimbo sort of sets a standard by which I think you have to judge everyone else on. And there are lots of people I have considered making videos for. I've thought, I think I might be able to make a case. And then I look at their best achievements and I look at Yojimbo, and he's just so far ahead of a lot of players, even at the thing they did best. And so I think more than anyone else, if you have a different pick than Yojimbo for GOAT, for greatest of all time, you have to show that they're better than Yojimbo. And you have to show that, I think, more than you have to show they're ahead of Delial or Seto, because while they have unique and incredible achievements, Yojimbo's total body of work is so large, he's the person you have to wrestle with if you make the case for anyone else. And so as I said, he's the gold standard. You know, Doc Evil won 2 tournaments in 3. Yojimbo did that 2 separate times. Delial won 6 tournaments. Yojimbo won 7. Was Up won 3 tournaments in 5 tries. Yojimbo won 4 tournaments in a 5-tournament run. Seto was the longest number 1 ever. Well, he won 4 tournaments total during that time. Did I mention Yojimbo won 4 tournaments in a 5-tournament stretch? And this argument also applies for Was Up, who was also slightly longer rated number 1 than Delial. Than Yojimbo. So there are many players I wanted to argue for GOAT, but Yojimbo's achievement list is so long, I had to cut it. I just couldn't make a case that I believed, because it's Yojimbo that sets the bar so high. And I think there are arguments for Delial, and there are arguments for Seto, and it is very reasonable to think they are the GOAT over Yojimbo, but Yojimbo is basically always the comparison case. And if you don't think Yojimbo's number 1, you don't think he's number 2, I just can't imagine not having him top 3. And there is no other player where I think there is no argument you could construct which doesn't have Yojimbo top 3. And I think there are arguments you could come up with. You could say, well, I really want this high peak, or I want this buried achievement, or I want, the most icons. And you could come up with other kinds of lists. And it's just very hard to construct a list that doesn't have Yojimbo right at the top. So if we look at peak runs, and I think I did cool calculations for this, which is I took players' 3 tournament runs, their best 3 tournament runs, and I took their win percentage over those runs, and that's the number in parentheses, and then I adjusted it for opposition level, which is I took the win percentages of every opponent they faced and adjusted their win percentage for how difficult their run was. And so you can see Doc Evil comes out with the best 3 tournament run, and Yojimbo comes 4th, but he also comes 5th. He had 2 entirely separate runs that are 2 of the 5 best 3 tournament runs of all time. And if you look at the best 5 tournament runs, you'll notice his 5 tournament run is even better than Doc Evil's 3 tournament run. Because the way the tournaments were ordered, Yojimbo doesn't have quite as good a 3 tournament run, but he has a 5 tournament run where he won 4 and 5 that is just so far ahead of any 5 tournament run anyone else ever had. Incidentally, lots of credits to players like Delial, Seto, Was Up, Great Sephiroth, MC that show up really high on these lists, as well as, Cookie and Kamikaze. It is very hard to make the top 10 on these lists. And then we can look at the best 7 tournament run, and again, Yojimbo is ahead by a solid margin, and in best 9 tournament run, he's only very narrowly behind. So if you want any kind of judgment of best peak ever, I think maybe, Doc Evil has a better 3 tournament run, but Yojimbo's 5 and 7 tournament runs are so good, his 9 tournament run is so good. Incidentally, Delial almost made the 9 tournament run list twice and did make the 7 tournament run list twice, which, huge credits to Delial for having multiple eras where he was just a superstar. But Yojimbo's at the top or incredibly close to it on all these lists, sometimes with multiple appearances, and it speaks to how absurdly high his peaks were. And so now I want to get to the problems with Yojimbo's case, because we've shown how far he surpasses the field in total achievements. But I think there are 3 arguments you can make against his case where you can start to argue for other players. And so one is he had slower success than other greats. And while he was getting a lot of icons early, but if you look at how many tournaments did it take you to reach 2 championships, to reach 3 championships, to reach 4 championships, he's usually not near even the top 3 or barely squeaking into the top 3. If you see how long to reach 2, 4, or 6 finals, 4, 6, or 8 semifinals, you set these benchmarks and you look at how quickly players achieve them, he is clearly behind not only the field, but behind direct contemporaries who were achieving more than he was at the same time he was there. And the argument here would be he did achieve more, but he also played longer, he continued going, he achieved later, and when he was going head-to-head against some other players, they achieved more and faster than he did. And then I think the second case against him, and I should say, he has this incredible resume. I had to, really dig deep to find cases against him, but I think I found 3 reasonable cases. The second case is he has excellent winning records against just about all levels of competition, but head-to-head, he trails in his results against winners. Wazup, Seto, Delial, Great Sephiroth, and MC all have better results against winners. And if you look at against some very top group like Just Those People, he continues to trail a bunch of them. And you look at win rates against the best of the best and against the very good, and he is very high up, but there are a bunch of people like Seto who are just consistently have better records against the best than Yojimbo does. And finally, he doesn't maintain as high a rank as others. While he spends the third most time top 1 and top 2, which is of course incredibly good, he's between 5th and 10th all time in time spent top 3, top 5, top 7, top 10. And so there are other players that maintained high ratings on the site longer, and again, ratings are based on your tournament performance. And I think he has some good answers to these accusations. I think all of these winners who achieved faster than him, well, most of them lost their last open match to Yojimbo and then left the site. Great Sephiroth, Seto, and Wazup all lost our final matches to Yojimbo. To Seto's credit, I believe in the site championships, Seto did win the open and then lost the others. But Great Sephiroth and myself, I was slaughtered in my last game. Great Sephiroth put up a better fight, and Seto, I think the 3 of us put up the best fight, but we all left after losing to Yojimbo. Yojimbo is the last person to beat so many strong players, and is it his fault that he won all the tournaments when he had beaten the best players, they left, and then he slaughtered everyone remaining? Is he to blame for that? It seems like, no, that's a huge achievement, and if they had stuck around, he would have gotten more wins against winners and moved up higher on that list. He did achieve slower starts than other greats, and he does have worse head-to-heads against them than some other greats do, but he has a really good record against winners and superstars. I'm not saying he has a weak record here. He is, towards the top of the field, just not quite at the top, and they're a bunch ahead. But ELO, the rating system I use, it adjusts for opposition. It says you beat a higher rated player, you get more credit for it. And he still achieved the highest ELO ever, surpassing where all the other greats had set the bars while they were active. And he was a remarkably fast icon gainer. He reached 12, 15, and 18 icons in fewer tournaments than anyone else took. He had the highest icon rate overall, meaning if you take the number of tournaments he achieved an icon, a quarterfinals or better, and divide by the total number of tournaments, he has a higher score there than anyone else has. And lastly, he's definitionally fastest to lots of achievements, because he's the only one who did them. And he did them quite quickly, given how huge totals he put up there. So looking at some peak performance stuff, on the left we have a rolling tournament average of win percentage, where he was putting up 95% win rate over a 4-tournament span, and he maintained this for about a year, actually, which is just incredible. Only Doc Evil and Wazup hit 95%. I think they're the only ones, other than him, to even hit 90%, and he hit 95% and maintained it much longer. This also meant he put up this rating lead, where you can see on the right his peak rating, 2503. He's over 200 points ahead of the field. No one has ever had such a big lead on the field. It's a truly absurd lead, and just looking at the chart, the amount he's ahead is absurd. The difference between him and second is bigger than the difference between second and 30th. Like, crazy. And what's more, if we keep looking at ratings, he has the highest final rating, a comfortable almost 50 points ahead of second place. He has the highest peak rating, 20 points ahead of second place. He has the second highest average rating, ahead of players like Seto. His ratings, I think, speak for themselves and are a good way to encapsulate his absurd level of dominance. So I'm going to talk a little about what made him so good. And again, I won't have examples from games because the records aren't saved. But I actually think his strength he wasn't like good at a particular type of move. It was this more all-around skill, and I hope I can describe that appropriately. So Vid says, his greatest skill probably lies in hand making. His hands are really impressive, may they come through card select or not, and he's also got the knowledge as to how to counter your hands. Making up a counter hand within a very short time can come in really handy. So using one hand for multiple games versus him may increase your chances of losing a lot. He also loves to set up traps whenever possible. Some moves may look to be pretty horrible, but in fact they're well thought out, just to lure you into playing a certain situation, which may doom you. He has a great amount of endurance and won't grow tired nor impatient from your game soon, so it may be the best to push for a win really early on. And then he gave a bunch of interviews after winning Triad Wars 10, and he spoke. Great Sephiroth was a harder matchup for him than I was, but I thought I can speak more to how well he thought about his matchup against me and how perfectly he nailed what I was doing. So I have more quotes from him beating me, but I'm going to give quotes from both. So he built a 5-phase starter hand to deal with Great Sephiroth's card select style, because he wanted to keep the game kind of controlled by what his hand was doing. He didn't like giving Great Sephiroth's hands a kind of purchase of the game, because they were never what he expected them to be, and so he wanted to figure out something that really worked on its own, without having expectations for what Great Sephiroth would play. He was often, as Vid said, a counter hand builder, but he didn't know how to do that for Great Sephiroth, so he figured out a very different type of style to employ. And he said, I literally spent hours, days, searching for the right cards, improving the current hand and testing it to see its flaws and trying to get rid of them. It was one hell of a hand. And then for his matchup against me, I analyzed Waz and the current rule set to come up with the best possible hand against him. Luckily enough, I'm able to memorize important games. I remember many tournament games, even after 3 or 4 years. That and the fact that I play Waz very often gave me a good idea of the cards he likes and is likely going to use in the first game. I made a few hands, all with different concepts, because as usual, if we tie a few, it all comes down to picking random hands and card select. However, I mainly focused on the very first game and the hand, because as mentioned above, I knew what he was going to use, and that was my big chance to capture the win. If I failed to do so, he would have changed his concepts, and it would be a toss-up again. For example, I knew he was going to focus on having double numbers towards each corner, expecting me to have A's in every direction, and he was going to use Lorana and Satan, especially, because he clearly likes these cards and often uses them. I also knew he expects me to use Larsa, which is my fave card, so Larsa was a no-no for the first 2 games. And I just want to say he had me nailed, especially in the later years. I was this very reactive player. I tended to just play card select hands. I didn't put in as much effort as I kind of wish I did now. But I built these hands just making sure I wouldn't kind of lose on the spot to some strong corner I wouldn't expect. And so I moved towards 8-8-7-6s, dynamic cards that could deal with a lot of threats. And he knew that about me. And not only did he know what I'd play, but he knew how to build a hand against what I was going to use. What was my strategy then? Sacrifice the balance of having A's in all 4 directions in order to give him less plus wall options. I had only one A, and it was 9A64 card, which was supposed to surprise him, and well, since he expected Larsa in the bottom left corner. The rest was a 9-9 card, and the same 2 8-8-7-6s he used. I added a 2-4-2-4 card to it, a 1 level 1 was required, to make his life harder with the 8-8s in case he was going first. And Yojimbo just read me like a book here and slaughtered me game 1. As he says in the interview, other rounds were much tougher for him than the finals against me, especially his round against Great Sephiroth in round 2, but also his one against Chickeny. But I just really liked this description of, I was at this point a very predictable player, and I think a lot of times you could predict what someone else was doing or have a feel for the cards they liked, but he not only knew that, he knew how to build a hand that would give my biases real problems, and I think he did a wonderful job of that, and it was a real strength he had. And I didn't read the interview at the time, but going back and reading it now, I thought it was a really cool interview where he spotted some very clever things. So Yojimbo Strengths. He prepared multiple hands honed to exploit opponents' weaknesses. I think he did this better than anyone else. He built hands with different starters, different backup starters, and of different, as he called them, concepts. But he clearly knew how to build around lots of different starter types, and certain hands were built to give opposing hands trouble, certain hands were built to work with themselves. He had this real variety of understanding. So I think he's overall not just the player with the best prep, but the smartest prep, the most honed, the best figured out. Not just that he spent the most hours, which I think he did, but also that he spent those hours really intelligently and thoughtfully. I think he was equally capable with high raw power cards, stuff like Larsa with big numbers, but also more dynamic plus wall focused cards. One of the times I beat him, I used 9-7-8-1s on level 8, which were not cards I initially liked, but he had used them effectively against me in the past, and I had adjusted to that clearly I was overrating dynamic cards and underrating some raw power cards, and I started moving more towards that, seeing his success and seeing how good with them he was. He was a great calculator, and as Vid said, he had the stamina to maintain that over extended matches, to keep playing games and keep playing precisely. And people credit his stamina, but as I said with Rhinoa stuff, and as I think was also shown with clan results, like in Clan League, or Clan Wars, often a tie would count, and so you only had one chance to get the win. And I think more than anyone else in Triple Triad history, he was good at winning in a single game, especially against weaker and middle opponents, but his one-game abilities, I think, are just off the charts. And rather than having a definitive style, like a type of move I can point to and say he did this really well, I think he had something even better, which is adaptability. That all the stuff he's really remarkably good at is adjusting to what other people are doing, figuring out ways to exploit the weaknesses in what they're doing, and being able to fit his style to whatever is needed in the moment. So overall, here's my case for Yojimbo. Normally in arguments like this, we end up with discussions of peak versus longevity. Is Michael Jordan or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar better? Abdul-Jabbar did it for 20 years, but Jordan obviously peaked higher. But with Yojimbo, we just don't have to, because he has the most achievements, and he peaked with higher win rates than anyone, with a higher rating than anyone, with a bigger rating margin than anyone. So for him, there's no argument of peak versus longevity. He has the argument with achievements, and he has the argument for peak. And not only does he have this amazing case, but he is the reason I can't argue for lots of other players I would really like to make videos about and may make videos about, but I can't make videos about, I don't think I can make a video about Kona being the GOAT, because Kona had this incredible run of icons, but it was just passed by Yojimbo. That there are just lots of absurdly talented players that achieved crazy things, and Yojimbo just achieved better versions of them. And his stamina, play, preparation, I think adaptability were legendary. Some records he held. He has the most championships ever. He has the most tournament matches won. He has the most finals, almost twice as many as anyone. He has the most semifinals. He has the most quarterfinals. Basically just has the most everything. He has this run of 4 championships and 5 tournaments. He has the highest peak ELO rating. He has the highest final rating. And he led 4 Clan Wars teams as leader of the clan consecutively to wins. And this is my argument for Yojimbo, the greatest Triple Triad player of all time. And I forgot to do this for the Seto video, but I wanted to say who you got at the end. We have Delial and his incredible finals record and his ability to win across all different formats. We have Doc Evil and his absurd 3-tournament run, the only 3 tournaments he ever played. We have Seto and his longest duration of any player as the top-ranked player on the site, but also this incredibly long duration of most time top 2, 3, 5, 7, 10, as well as the highest win rates of anyone here against other winners. And then we have Yojimbo, who both peaked with these unbelievable win rates and has the longest list of achievements and successes anyone has ever had. So, who you got?